This is Daily Armenia, ＳիվիլNeթ's daily news digest. Here's what's making headlines in Armenia today. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has laid out his government's new 5-year program, setting out the administration's priorities through 2031 and the next nationwide elections. At a government session today, Pashinyan said his government had been forced into crisis management following the 2018 revolution, first because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war and its aftermath. He said the progress made toward peace with Azerbaijan now gives the government an opportunity to return to the agenda it had set after coming to power. On foreign policy, the government's top priority is what it calls the institutionalization of peace with Azerbaijan. That includes signing and ratifying the peace treaty, continuing border delimitation and demarcation, and expanding contacts and trade between the two countries. Turkey is the second major foreign policy priority. The government says it wants to establish diplomatic relations with Ankara, open the land border, and operate at least 2 checkpoints, while expanding transport, energy, and digital connections. The program also emphasizes closer ties with the European Union and United States. Armenia plans to continue aligning with EU standards and working toward visa liberalization, while the Trump route for international peace and prosperity is identified as a priority project in cooperation with Washington. On the economy, the government wants to diversify export markets and double the volume of domestically produced exports. The plan places particular emphasis on high technology, artificial intelligence, and science, setting a target of increasing research spending to 1% of GDP, with $500 million in annual high-tech exports. The program also includes commitments on democratic governance and human rights. The government says it will work on improving the effectiveness and accountability of public institutions, while continuing judicial and public administration reforms. In energy, the government plans to expand renewable power while replacing the Metsamor nuclear plant. It aims to make a final decision on the design of a new nuclear facility by the end of 2027. The program also indicates that normalization with Azerbaijan and Turkey could open new energy corridors that could help Armenia diversify its energy supplies. In a notable departure, Russia is no longer described as Armenia's strategic ally in the government's new 5-year program. The document also removes Nagorno-Karabakh from the country's foreign policy agenda, marking significant differences from the previous program adopted in 2021. Russia is listed 8th in the foreign policy section, after Armenia's 4 neighbors and the European Union, the United States, and France. The 2021 program pledged to strengthen allied relations and strategic partnership with Moscow across political, military, economic, energy, and other areas. The new program instead calls for the transformation, development, and deepening of relations with Russia under what it describes as new circumstances. The terms strategic alliance, allied relations, and strategic partnership are no longer used in reference to Russia. The Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, of which Armenia is a member but has frozen its participation, was previously described as a key element of Armenia's security system, but is now absent from the new foreign policy framework. Economic relations with Russia remain part of the government's plans, though that sector has taken a major hit with Moscow's sweeping bans on Armenian agricultural products. Armenia says it will continue working with the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union, while also seeking to diversify its export markets. Nagorno-Karabakh is absent from the new government's program. The 2021 plan devoted a separate section to the Karabakh conflict, calling for a peaceful settlement and describing Armenia as the guarantor of the security of Karabakh Armenians. It also committed the government to addressing the social problems of displaced people and preserving Armenian cultural and religious heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh. The new program contains no specific provisions on social programs for displaced Artsaksis, more than 100,000 of whom were ethnically cleansed to Armenia following Azerbaijan's September 2023 military offensive. It also contains no specific commitment concerning any of the Armenian cultural and religious heritage remaining in Nagorno-Karabakh. 1 year after the Washington summit, what has the Trump route for international peace and prosperity actually achieved so far? Sergei Melkonyan, research fellow at the Yerevan-based think tank Apri Armenia, joins ՍիվիլՆեթ to discuss TRIP's geopolitical goals, as well as the risk that it could enable a new form of blockade on Armenia. Melkonyan notes how the project fits into Azerbaijan's regional ambitions, including its Western Azerbaijan narrative against Armenia. The conversation also delves into TRIP's potential role in energy cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and what would need to happen for the project to meaningfully benefit Armenia. Watch the interview through the link in this video's description. And finally, the ＳիվիլՆեթ number of the day is 24.6. That's the percentage drop in the number of tourists to Armenia this July compared to the same month last year. However, there's a catch. July 2025 was not a normal month. It welcomed 263,592 tourists to Armenia, the highest of any month on record, based on available statistics from the country's tourism committee. This July, that number fell to 198,709. That's the worst July since 2022, when the country was still recovering from the COVID-era travel collapse, and was almost 20,000 less than this June. But despite the dramatic July drop, Armenia has still welcomed 1.24 million tourists in the first 7 months of this year, its second highest total ever for the period, only behind 2023. That could be pointing to an evolution in Armenia's travel trends, with more people coming throughout the year, rather than the traditional heavy concentration in the summer months. Meanwhile, there's also been a noticeable drop in visitors from traditional diaspora markets such as the United States, which has seen 19.3% less visitors this year compared to last. Russia, Georgia, and Iran remain Armenia's 3 biggest markets, and all 3 are up compared with last year, especially Georgia, with an increase of 14%, or 22,419 more visitors than this time last year. In 2025, Armenia reached 75% of the government's target to have 3 million tourists annually by 2030. And as always, please follow ＳiviLNet for the latest news and independent reporting from our contributors on the ground here in Armenia.